Did people wondered in those days why it had to come to this? There was very little time for reflection, and even 40 years later, these images are still repressed. Too much had been destroyed back then, both in them and around them. Survival was the order of the day, and getting out of the rubble. On May 8th, Field Marshal Keitel signs the unconditional surrender of the German Wehrmacht in Karlshorst. Nothing is left of the former German imperial capital except for ruins and remnants of its past grandeur. It will become an occupied city, divided among the victorious powers for an indefinite period. Berlin will not recover from this quickly. The victors agree on that. The over 700-year-old Prussian residence, capital of the German Reich, is bombed to rubble and ashes. Berlin shares this fate with over 160 other German cities, whose historic city centers were largely wiped out. Just as in the capital, Allied bombers destroyed countless cultural treasures throughout the Reich in hundreds of nightly attacks, forever irretrievably. The street unter den Linden, the Friedrichstadt, the Museum Island, and the Berlin Palace are almost completely destroyed in their substance. Do the Germans actually feel May 8, 1945 as a day of liberation? Certainly, he had freed them all from the inhumane system of National Socialist tyranny. But hundreds of thousands of refugees who have lost their homes, their possessions, who will start from scratch in the coming decades, will not be so much grateful to their liberators, but rather see the cause of their own suffering, of flight, expulsion, captivity, and lack of freedom in the inglorious end of the lost war. Yet the causes lie in its beginning, in the very start of that tyranny that ultimately led to war, deeply rooted in that totalitarian system which went down in history as the infamous Third Reich. For now they are only dealing with the Soviets. The First Order explicitly states, among other things, that the cleanup work is to begin immediately without any delay. A Soviet commandant's office is established, under the leadership of Colonel General Bersarin. Together with the military governor Zhukov, he inspects the victory column. They are the losers. Bread distributors hand out bread, and the Germans reach out for it. Standing in line for hours for something to eat, a bowl of soup, those who are starving don't ask much about ideology. Needs shrink to a minimum. Those who have nothing left can use anything. Berlin in May 1945, an apocalyptic scene. People rummage through the trash to avoid starving. A herd of cows in the middle of the city. And then the thousands with handcarts and pushcarts loaded with the remnants of their owners' belongings. A stream of refugees like after the 30 Years' War. They come from East Prussia, Pomerania, Bohemia, and Silesia. They can no longer return to their homeland. Most don't know where they want to go. That this is supposed to be Berlin, the former capital where all roads once crossed, is hard for them to fully grasp and understand. Yet it is strange. Although it is now a wasteland of stones, the city remains the place where people hope to receive news of loved ones and relatives, even in these days. In June, the first trains with wounded returnees arrive. They come home from the prisoner camps. Before them lies the destroyed city. A collection of bizarre house skeletons. The notion that one could inhabit them makes it seem absurd. But it is summer, and the weather is warm, so warm that people can sleep between these stones and still survive. If the capitulation had occurred in November, who knows? Maybe people wouldn't have had the courage and determination to rebuild the city from its ruins. The destruction is total. What wasn't destroyed by bombs was blown up by the Nazis in the last days of the war. No bridge is left standing. People make their way across the water on beams and planks, whatever is at hand. The makeshift, the provisional, defines life in Berlin this summer. The water supply has also collapsed. The pumps are reactivated. It almost seems like the good old days almost, if it weren't for all the rubble scattered around. Attempting to clear the chaos and to restore some semblance of order, the city was destroyed in a few nights of bombing. Rebuilding will take decades. It's hard to believe, but by the end of May, the first buses are running. The tram is also running again. Even if Berliners sometimes have to wait for hours, a first piece of urbanity has finally returned to the city. Even the subway can resume operations on some sections as early as June. The paralysis of the first days is overcome. Gradually, the pulse of the city begins to beat again. That Berlin becomes habitable again is thanks to these women. Thousands of them will clear the war's rubble over the next few months. They belong to a generation that was taught to act on orders. They do this work for a pittance, disciplined, following the simple realization that one cannot live among piles of rubble. And Berlin lives. By mid-May, the Soviets appoint a chief mayor. The architect Dr. Arthur Werner. A magistrate is formed in a fast-track process. Specialized departments are created and begin their work. The main problem, nutrition. To get an initial overview, food ration cards are issued. They barely cover basic needs. No one gets full from that. The queue for bread, the symbol of these early years. Initially tolerated by the authorities, then explicitly desired. Self-sufficiency on a barter basis. Official barter centers have been set up where one person is in need of boots, another person requires a radio, and a third person is looking for underwear. The barter trade works, if only because people always consider what they do not possess to be desirable. Everything is solid pre-war goods. The new look hasn't been invented yet. Officially, you can also trade. After all, we are in Germany. Rags for decent clothes and uniforms for civilian attire. the swastikas disappear into the shredder. A nation just recently geared entirely towards war must relearn, and thus overnight. The rubber tires of former military vehicles are now turned into shoe soles. The idea is obvious, the implementation not too difficult. Anyone who has once eaten their soup from a steel helmet will not be surprised by it. A short clip from a newsreel of that time period.
Just as steel helmets and airplane parts were previously another piece of war equipment, the bazooka is now put to peaceful and useful use in the kitchen and household. A metal goods factory in Berlin-Wilmersdorf has developed a work process through which sieves, casseroles, and bottle funnels can be made from the parts of the bazooka.
A bit more tedious. The removal of the ubiquitous Nazi emblems. Thousands of swastikas are carefully removed from the cityscape this summer as if they had never existed in the first place. In some places, the symbols of the Third Reich proved to be extremely resistant and enduring. In early July, the Western occupying troops arrive. Americans, British, and French. They have strict orders. No contact with the population. In the minds of many soldiers, the Germans are still viewed as incorrigible Nazis who are in need of re-education. First of all, one demonstrates unity with the current governors. This mutual goodwill, unfortunately, won't last for a very long time. But in this summer, the victors raise their glasses to each other. The Americans have paid a high price for their presence in Berlin. The evacuation of Thuringia and parts of Saxony. They agree to establish an Allied Control Council and an Allied Kommandatura. In mid-July, largely unnoticed by the Berliners, the Potsdam Conference begins under heavy security measures at the gates of the city. The meeting of the three, Churchill, Trümmern, and Stalin, at Cecilienhof Palace. Officially, there is much talk of peace, but primarily the Potsdam Conference is about dividing the spoils and redrawing the borders. Malicious tongues claim that Germany, lying on the ground, has been bartered away by the three Allied leaders at the Green Table these days. The Soviets had already dismantled industrial plants before the arrival of the Western occupation forces, taking anything that wasn't nailed down to their devastated territories. Berlin, one of the largest industrial metropolises in Europe before the war, will need much more time to rebuild than the rest of Germany. BMW, Osram, Siemens, Borsig, and AEG are now just heaps of rubble. Train stations, tracks, the port, all totally demolished. The streets are filled with 75 million cubic meters of debris.